Good morning, boys. I know it's been a little while. I was bouncing this boat off of a couple of the shoals here, and actually I sprung a leak doing that. And so I'm going to have to take the boat out of the water and um, find the leak. So hopefully it just stays afloat until then. And let's see. I know I told you guys I'd tell you about Iraq, and I'm going to. And I love you guys, and I hope you're doing well. And yeah, I guess so. I'll talk about Iraq now. So I went to Iraq 3 times, and the first time I went over there, I went with 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment. I was in the 2nd Squadron, 11th Regiment, and they were infantry guys, and we were actually training people in the Mojave Desert at the National Training Center to get certified to go to Iraq and Afghanistan. And I went over there, and actually what we took over to start off with, we took over from, well, let me back up. We flew into Kuwait, and this was in January 2005. And our vehicles, the Humvees, and I was in a support platoon for the infantry headquarters, and my main job was I had these guys that we would issue out and keep the ammunition for the unit. And we got to Kuwait, and they had welders there that were taking our vehicles and adding, I don't know, it was maybe close to 1/4 inch thick steel plates where the doors were supposed to be, and then we would put sandbags in the floor and on the top and the floorboards, trying to harden them is some sort of protection against the IEDs that they would set up. Although the IEDs during that time, January 2005 to January 2006, were mostly 155 millimeter artillery rounds, and sometimes they would even daisy chain them together in a series of up to sometimes 17. I mean, these were huge IEDs, improvised explosive devices. So we were getting our vehicles ready and working pretty hard there in Kuwait, and they gave us, I think we had 10 days or 2 weeks to get everything ready, and then we were going to drive into Iraq. And so this was OIF 3. It was the 3rd year of Iraq. And so in the support platoon, there was 3 other squads, sections. I had a squad, and I was a staff sergeant at the time, and I won't mention his name. There was another staff sergeant, and I went out to go check on my guys, and I found out that he had sent his guys over, and all the hard work my guys had done, he stole all the sandbags that my guys had filled and put on the vehicles, and I caught him alone in the tent that we were staying in, and I confronted him, and he ran away, and I think I scared him. So anyway, I'll never forget, we drove across Kuwait. Kind of want a cup of coffee. Hold on a second while I get a cup of coffee. So we drove into Kuwait and drove into Iraq. The first night, we stayed the night at a base called Navstar, and it was on the Kuwait-Iraq border. Much better. Coffee. And I'll never forget, we woke up that morning, and we had to leave in a hurry, and I think we slept in our trucks. And our battalion XO was drinking a cup of coffee he had cooked on a little stove outside. And I said, coffee looks good, sir. And he shared that cup of coffee with me, and that was the best cup of coffee I ever had. And so that morning, as we were driving into Iraq, and it took us 2 days, all in all, it was a 3-day drive to the base we were going to occupy. That first day in Iraq was actually Iraq's first preliminary elections. So as far as safety was concerned, there wasn't supposed to be anybody out on the road. It was a rule. I remember S4 Captain Franks was a convoy commander, and he told us, he said, we got to be prickly out there. And everybody knew exactly what he meant, that we had to be prickly. I remember we got briefed on that, if anybody walked in front of the vehicles, even children, we weren't allowed to stop. And I thank God nobody ever walked in front of my vehicle like that. And we were driving. I remember at one point going through this area that there was nothing. It was just desert, and for quite a few miles, and all of a sudden these kids just pop up out of nowhere on the side of the road, and they wanted water and food and things, so we'd throw them water and whatever, and oh man, I can't remember the name of it. We finally got to it was the second night, and I can't remember the name of the base now, but and it's on the tip of my tongue, but basically the whole city was secured because there was a large power station, and there were wild dogs everywhere, and they warned us about them having rabies. And it must have been a Friday that we got there, because the chow hall was having steak and lobster. And in Iraq, I think every Friday, pretty much most bases you went to, they had steak and lobster. It was kind of a nice treat. And we got up early in the morning, and I had to use the bathroom, and I was on the porta potty, and I can't remember the way I sat down or something. I pissed all over myself on the porta potty. I was so embarrassed, and I already probably kind of stunk, and I feel bad whoever was sitting in the truck with me when we were going up to the base. Anyway, we finally got up to FOB Kalsu is the name of the base. FOB stands for Forward Operating Base. And our convoy, before we were allowed to come in, we had to wait, I don't remember, maybe 30 minutes or something outside the gate. And outside my window, maybe 30 meters away, was a dog eating the intestines out of another dog, ripping it out. And I remember thinking, it was very symbolic for me. I remember thinking that this was a dog-eat-dog world, and in my first day and on the base, seeing that made me realize that it's really true. And it was true for me there, and us, and all of us there. And we got onto the base, and I had the first night there, we stayed in a GP medium, which is a large tent, and I had a section of guys, and two of them were E5s, and I won't mention his name, but Sergeant. Anyway, he was so scared that night because they took a lot of we took a lot of indirect fire, and he slept in all of his gear, his helmet, and his bulletproof vest. What was that called? That was the flak vest. What was that called? Anyway, he slept in it all on the cot. It was funny. And you know what? We'll just stop there, and I'll tell you about my first day at FOB Kalsu next time. And oh yeah, I was going to tell you a little bit about the Bible I was reading this morning, and Joseph in the Bible, he never did anything wrong, and God gave him these dreams that he was going to be somebody, and his brothers were jealous, and they sold him, and they were going to kill him. They were so jealous, and they ended up selling him as a slave, and he ended up going to prison because his master's wife tried having relations with him, and he wouldn't do it because he was a righteous man, and he went to prison. And just all these awful things were just, he had to suffer. Joseph suffered and suffered and was a righteous man, but God rewarded him in the end. It took a while. And I think the other thing I wanted to bring up was that also David. I was reading Samuel Shual, and David did nothing wrong and was a godly man. I mean, he didn't not ever do anything wrong, because we know he did. But in this case, where Samuel wanted to kill him, and David had to go on the run. He had to run for his life. He was everybody's hero, but Samuel was jealous. And I love you boys, and I hope that I'm proud of you, and I hope that you guys are doing well, and I'm gonna try and see you as soon as I can.